That's one small step for man.
I have a dream.
We fight for peace. Welcome to American Snapshots. I'm Kate Kelly from America Comes Alive, and today I'm going to tell you the true story of Paul Revere. Now, thanks to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, we all know the story of Paul Revere's heroic ride that took place on April 18th, 1775. But what most people don't know was he was one of many messengers that were sent out from Boston in order to spread the word, because the colonists needed to know that the British were coming on shore. So the scene was this. Before Paul Revere headed out, the British ships were all lined up in the harbor, and the colonists knew it was only a matter of time until they came on land and started some sort of an attack. So what the colonists planned was to have several messengers that would fan out, and that way if one got stopped by the British, perhaps the other would get through. Now, the lanterns we know so much about were actually a backup plan in case all the messengers got wiped out. That they were to be there to signal what was happening. If something was happening, it would people could look back at the steeple, check to see what the status of the lanterns were, and would be able to reflect on what was supposed to be happening. So on April 18th, trouble was brewing, and so they knew this was the time to send the signal. The sexton of the Old North Church and his friend went into the church with the plans of taking the lanterns up to the top of the church steeple. Now, a staircase got them partway up to the steeple, but after that they went through a trap door and basically had to do what was the equivalent of mountain climbing on ragged edges of brickwork to get up there. So they certainly would have had to use both hands and both feet. To carry the lanterns with them, they might have hooked one on the back of their belt and made two trips, or perhaps they had the ability to do both lanterns at the same time. But either way, getting up to the top of the steeple would have been difficult. Now, we've all heard about the signals that were being given, one if by land and two if by sea. Now, keep in mind that was not meaning two if by sea, meaning the British are coming over from England. It meant they were going across the Charles River, which was faster than doing it by land. It meant the British would come over, get ashore after they crossed the river, and then they would have a shorter trip up to Lexington. Now, the British plan was this. They wanted to get to Lexington to arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock. From there, they were going to go on to Concord because they knew the Patriots were storing a great number of supplies and ammunition. So that was the route they were taking. When the word got out that it was time to set up the lanterns, Paul Revere knew that was being taken in place. And so his route was that he was going to be rowed across the Charles River. A friend was going to have a horse ready for him, and he was going to go up one direction to get to Lexington. A shoemaker by the name of William Dawes was going to go up a slightly different route, and they were both going to head for Lexington to warn Adams and Hancock. Now, in the process, they did both make the route. They actually made it to Lexington in time to warn the men so that Adams and Hancock could get out of the town. And then they were on their way on up to Concord. And on their way to Concord, they ran into a local doctor from Concord, a guy named Samuel Prescott. Now, Samuel Prescott had been on a courting call. He had been visiting his soon-to-be wife. And so he was on his way home late, not at all aware of what was going on. And when he heard the news, he was happy to help. He was going to lead the men the most efficient way to Concord. And the only problem was they ran into the British on the way. So they were all stopped. Now, the true prize in that group was Paul Revere. And so the British were very focused on Revere, giving Dawes and Prescott an opportunity to escape. Now, Dawes didn't know his way on from Lexington as well as Prescott did. So Prescott actually made it all the way to Concord to sound the alarm. Revere was stuck being held by the British. Now, Revere was a smart guy, and he told them that the army that was coming behind him was much larger than it actually was. And so the British were concerned but didn't quite know what to do with that information. But then at the first sign of Patriot fire, the British thought, this doesn't seem so good. So what they did was they took Revere's better horse, put Paul Revere on an old nag, and turned him loose. So fortunately for Paul Revere, he was able to get back to safety. Now, those were not the only two riders involved in this type of mission. They also had to have someone who spread out and carried the news north and south. One guy was a guy named Israel Bissell, and he was a regular post-road rider, meaning it was his job to go up and down delivering the mail. He headed out from Watertown, Massachusetts on April 19th, 2 days later, and rode for almost 400 miles as hard as he could, covering 4 days. One of his horses actually died because he was riding so hard. But in the meantime, he was there saying, "The war has begun, the war has begun, be prepared." So he was there too. Now, colonists did not have telephones, and they certainly didn't have cell phones. So this type of alarm system was used again and again throughout the course of the war. And if we move forward to just April 1777, I can tell you about a young woman who helped with this kind of a ride. A woman named Sybil Luddington was daughter of, her father was named Colonel Henry Luddington. He was in charge of the Dutchess County militia. Word had come that the British had come ashore at Campo Beach in Connecticut and were going to be coming his direction toward Danbury to destroy the arms that were there. Colonel Luddington heard of this, and he knew he needed to remain home in order to be there to tell the incoming men what the plans were. So he had no nearby neighbor. He had 2 older daughters, and he knew Sybil, his oldest, was 16 years old, knew the roads better than anybody else. So he sent her off on a Saturday night. It was pouring rain, it was dark, and he said, "Sybil, you've got to alert the men to come in, we've got to organize." So Sybil set off that night and did a 40-mile round trip successfully, coming home and having alerted all the militia to come and meet her father. As you know, it took many more battles throughout the colonies before the Patriots successfully rid themselves of British rule. And the fate of each battle relied on citizens, just like you and me, doing their part. Paul Revere, William Dawes, Samuel Prescott, Israel Bissell, and Sybil Luddington all did their part so that you and I could have freedom today. If you go to my site, AmericaComesAlive.com, you'll find the Sybil Luddington story and many others. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's one small step for man.
I have a dream.
We fight